Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your deep dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, intuitive tarot reader, and professional witch, and today I'm talking about tarot and Lilith. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every Monday morning to check out the latest episode. If you love the show, the best way to support it for free is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. If you want to access the most up-to-date info on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life, you can join my newsletter where that is a one-stop shop. The link will be in the show notes to do that. If you're interested or know someone that might be a good fit to be a guest on the podcast, please fill out my form for the guest inquiry. And you can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or newly on Patreon. All right, so for our main discussion today, I am discussing tarot and Lilith. And I've been wanting to do this. I've just been thinking about Lilith recently, and I feel like Lilith actually goes along very well with kind of February love, self-love season of the year. I know I did a prior episode on a self-love tarot spread using the Goddess of Tarot deck. So I'm also going to be talking about the Devil card from the Goddess of Love Tarot deck today, which depicts Lilith. So I'm going to grab that card and have it in front of me. I'll put it up on the screen so you all can see as well. So I'll start there and then I'll get into a bit more like lore about Lilith. I'll be referencing the Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara G. Walker and the Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft, the second edition by Rosemary Ellen Gully. So yeah, let's get started with the Devil card in the Goddess of Love Tarot deck and talk a bit about Lilith. So, like I said, in the Goddess of Love Tarot deck by Gabriella Herstick and illustrated by Julia Pescu, the Devil card depicts Lilith. She has these like red wings. There's a snake involved. She's like fairly naked with the snake sort of like decoratively covering parts of her. We get like the five-pointed star above her of the pentagram, and then I'm looking at what else. We get some roses on each of the edges of the pentagram, like points. And then, yeah, really all we see, her face is covered by like the snake's face actually in this depiction. Oh, and we get some drops of blood from the red wings that she has, like angel wings that are red. But yeah, the snake's own face is like covering the face of the depiction here. So we kind of just see black hair and perhaps like a red headband. And that's like kind of what we can see of her. In Capricorn season, I talked about this, but the Devil card is often associated with Capricorn. So that is this card's astrological correspondence. And it says to liberate yourself from the expectations and desires of another and live your life on your own terms is powerful. The Devil invites you to break the chains, to release the fear of the depths and depravity of all of life, and to be embodied in the experience of humanity. The Devil card is the anarchist who wields unbridled self-awareness as the source of power, and no one represents this more than the bad bitch of the Talmud, the book of Jewish commentary on the Torah, Lilith. As Adam's first wife, she refused to be subservient to him, especially during sex. When he refused anything but missionary sex, Lilith proclaimed the ineffable name of God, sprouted wings, and went to the Red Sea, hence kind of the red wings, where she birthed scores of demon children by having sex with men as they slept, or so the story goes. Lilith represents the uncontrollable, erotic, divine feminine. She represents the power of the devil as a liberating force and as a source of fear. It is the only It is only when one is unfamiliar with their own power that another's seem like a threat. This is Lilith's gift. Total autonomy. Lilith doesn't adhere to religious, social, or political norms, and to worship at her altar is to worship at the totality of the self. And so the affirmation associated with this card says, I am a dark god or goddess of love, lust, and desire, and I claim my sexuality as my own. The journal question is, in what ways can I reclaim my erotic self and sexual power? And then this deck also has rituals in it sometimes. So there's a whole ritual here of connecting with the devil card, with Lilith, and with yourself as well. That's very cool. So that's where we're going to kind of start with Lilith and her depiction. I'm going to read a little bit more from the Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets about Lilith to just fill in a bit more of like the lore. And honestly, I guess I will also put this in my references as well. But one of the best depictions of Lilith I've seen is in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. TV show that ended a couple of years ago. But there's a character in there that is throughout all the seasons that is Lilith. We don't know it at first, but she kind of comes clean after a while. And we get just like a lot more of the nuance of Lilith. Again, we kind of see her as very innocent at first, and then it kind of gets revealed that she's Lilith, and we see her as very devil-like or entirely evil, or kind of like all the normal things that sometimes religion and Christianity associates with Lilith. And then we kind of see like, oh, actually, like she does care about things, and like there's a lot more depth to her. And so I think that aspect is important, and so recommend that it's a long show, so you got to be committed to really go into it. And if you want a more brief intro to the show, on my tarot and pop culture season, I did an episode on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, because they have a tarot reader in an episode where she reads a lot of the main characters' cards, and we kind of get to see like what happens, or kind of the fallout from that, let's say. All right, so again, this is from the Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, one of my favorite kind of reference tomes by Barbara G. Walker. And so Lilith, if you don't know or weren't raised in kind of like Christianity, was Adam's first wife, a relic of the early rabbinical attempt to assimilate the Sumero-Babylonian goddess Belit-Ili or Belili to Jewish mythology. To the Canaanites, Lilith was Balat, the divine lady. On a tablet from Ur circa 2000 BCE, she was addressed as Lilik. Hebraic tradition said Adam married Lilith because he grew tired of coupling with beasts, a common custom, it says, of Middle Eastern herdsmen, though the Old Testament declared it a sin. Adam tried to force Lilith to lie beneath him in the kind of, quote, missionary position favored by male-dominant societies, and Muslims were so insistent on the male superior sexual position at the time that they said, in quotes, accursed be the man who maketh woman heaven and himself earth, end quote. Catholic authorities said any sexual position other than the male superior one is sinful, but Lilith was neither a Muslim nor a Catholic. She sneered at Adam's sexual crudity, cursed him, and flew away to make her home by the Red Sea. God sent angels to fetch Lilith back, but she cursed them too, ignored God's command, and spent her time coupling with quote-unquote demons, it says, whose lovemaking evidently pleased her better, and giving birth to 100 children every day. So she's seen as this kind of like demon mother in that way. So God had to produce Eve as Lilith's more docile replacement. Lilith's fecundity and sexual preferences show that she was a great mother in that way of like at the time settled agricultural tribes who resisted the invasions of nomadic herdsmen represented by Adam. Early Hebrews disliked the Great Mother who drank the blood of Abel the herdsman after his slaying by the elder god of agriculture and smithcraft Cain. In Genesis. So Lilith's Red Sea was another version of Kali Ma's ocean of blood, which gave birth to all things who needed periodic sacrificial replenishment. There may have been a connection between Lilith and the Etruscan divinity Lilith, who had no face and who waited at the gate of the underworld along with Ida and Persephone. Okay, so like Hades and Persephone, to receive the souls of the dead. The underworld gate was a yoni and also a lily, which had no face. Admission into the underworld was often mythologized as a sexual union. The lily, or lilu, lotus, was the Great Mother's flower yoni, whose title formed Lilith's name. The story of Lilith disappeared from the canonical Bible, but her daughters, the Lilim, haunted men for over 1,000 years. Well into the Middle Ages, the Jews were still manufacturing amulets to keep away the Lilim, who were lustful she-demons given to copulating with men in their dreams, causing nocturnal emissions. Naturally, the Lilim squatted on top of their victims in the position favored by ancient matriarchs. Greeks adopted the Lilim and called them Lamai, Empase, or forcers in, or daughters of Hecate. Christians also adopted them and called them harlots of hell, or succubae, the female counterparts of incubi, or like an incubus and a succubus. Celibate monks tried to fend them off by sleeping with their hands crossed over their genitals, clutching a crucifix. It was said that each time a pious Christian had a wet dream, Lilith laughed. Even if a male child laughed in his sleep, people said Lilith was fondling him. To protect baby boys against her, chalk circles were drawn around cradles with the written names of the 3 angels God sent to fetch Lilith back to Adam, even though the angels had proved incapable of dealing with her. Some said men and babies should not be left alone in the house or Lilith might seize them. Another common name for the daughters of Lilith was night hag. This term didn't imply that they were ugly. On the contrary, they were supposed to be very beautiful. As with their brothers, the incubus or incubi, they were presumed so expert at lovemaking that after an experience with a night hag, a man couldn't be satisfied with the love of a mortal woman. And actually the entry after this is about lily, or the flower of Lilith. So like lily or lotus flowers are associated with genital magic, the kind of like Lilith, the Sumero Babylonian goddess of creation, and the lily has often represented the virgin aspect of the triple goddess. The rose represented the maternal aspect, and the lily was sacred to Astarte, who was also Lilith, or as Northern Europeans called her, Ostera, the goddess of Easter and Easter lilies. So all of those things are associated, and we are coming into the season of Ostera, of spring equinox, of Easter lilies, and so it's very interesting to me that we kind of move from this, like, again, in sort of more commercial ways, from like Valentine's Day, the month of love and connection and kind of like lust and sexuality and relationships, often as it's depicted, into Easter or Ostera or Easter lily time, and also the spring equinox, when kind of all of the plants are starting to come back alive and things are growing again. The lily, to go a bit further into this, because of its pagans associations with virgin motherhood, the lily was also used to symbolize impregnation of the Virgin Mary. Some authorities claimed, I'm going to skip that part. But yeah, it's just interesting to me that like this lily is associated with Lilith, who is this like goddess of her own kind of creation, right? The creation of demons in this way, as sort of like a foil to perhaps like the things that a male patriarchal god created. And that we have this kind of like lily, lotus, vaginal, like creation piece where they're all just very much tied together in this way. And again, like in this sort of season of the year, as this episode's coming out, kind of end of February, moving into March, Easter like season. And again, like Easter, if you grew up in Christian tradition, is talked about with Jesus and Jesus's all that kind of stuff, sacrifice, coming back, the resurrection, the springing of new life, or coming back from the dead, that we sort of are like coming back from the dead of winter, if we look at it from the sort of like Persephone underworld aspect of it, but that there's all these other kind of associations with, again, things coming back to life. A lot of like animals are often very like bunnies, right? I have ducks and chickens in my backyard on the farm, like lay a lot of eggs, become more, they like start trying to have babies again come spring. And so all of that is also associated with this like time of year of kind of like the creation time of year, which again, really like Lilith is kind of, like I said, like the feminine, divine creator goddess, as the kind of like opposite to the perhaps like patriarchal god that we see often depicted in Christianity. All right, so yeah, that's our reading for today. Our book reading. So yeah, I guess for all of these reasons, I thought it was interesting to talk about Lilith and tarot. Lilith gets associated with the devil card, and certainly with just the devil in general. Again, in kind of like Christian tradition, or as like the mother of demons, seen as very like corrupting, right? All of that history talking about like, yeah, when men like basically like being at the whim of Lilith, or that like anytime someone is having like wet dreams or nocturnal emissions, as they say in the book, that like they were very fearful of Lilith, or that was Lilith like coming to get them and to create more demon spawn. It's very much like turns this creator energy into basically like the worst thing, I would say, that like Christianity can think of, which is like, right, a woman who can create all on her own, right? Like doesn't need a man to do it, and is not subservient to a man, right? Like she says no thank you to Adam and what he wants. And the patriarchal god creates, oh, okay, we'll give him another woman that's different with Eve, right? We have the snake in this image of the devil card and the goddess of love tarot deck. So kind of also representing, right, the fall, which is how it's talked about when Eve eats the apple in the Garden of Eden, and the fall of like humanity, or the sins of humanity come in from this woman. Again, that's like, oh, how nice. Like in our original Christianity iterations of like the genesis of the world, we have like a man who's totally fine and perfect, obviously, and then we have like a woman that's flawed, becomes like a demon goddess. Oh, okay, we don't want her. Now we have like a more, again, like a docile version of her that is more subservient and still can do no right, right? Like, or still is basically blamed for the fall of humanity, or all of these sins of humanity, falling to temptation, falling to the snake and eating the apple, as it's often depicted, but probably not an apple at that time period. If we're thinking of historical accuracy, perhaps a pomegranate, which again is associated with Persephone being in the underworld and being in the sort of like death aspect. Because to me, like this goddess of love deck, why I love it so much. It talks about, it's a book and deck for embodying the erotic divine feminine. And a lot of the divine feminine that gets talked about these days in our modern era is the divine feminine, and then like we set aside the erotic part. We're like, I don't know if that's like for everyone, but right, like as the divine feminine, that is also that creation energy, because like guess what, men are a part of creation but are not the ones, right, literally usually birthing things into the world, and that will always require the energy of the sort of creator woman goddess to do that part, to transmute something into a child, into an idea, into things like that. And I would say, like, at least anecdotally, in the circles that I'm in, it's very much acknowledged that like women are the creative energy of a lot of the world, or inspire the creative energy of a lot of the world. And that when we embrace that aspect of ourselves, of each other, that there's a lot of power in that, which again is like the other aspect of Lilith, right? Like she is the like epitome of autonomy. Like she decides, I will not take what is given to me. I will leave and take for myself what I want. And I don't actually need anyone else to help me with that. And that doesn't mean that we don't need community or that we don't need other people at all. But that creative energy in that way, right? That she is said to be the great mother, the mother of demons, of like birthing these ideas or beings that go on to whatever it may be, create mischief, or that a lot of the times things are demonized in particular Christianity because they are autonomous, or they do not comply, or they do not submit to subservience, and certainly not to a patriarchal God. And I like when it talks about in the Woman's Encyclopedia that there is this also like greater allegory towards like the kind of like foraging, or you have the people, like the herdsmen, um, and then you have the agricultural kind of like societies coming together, and a bit of that conflict there, because agricultural society requires you stay in one place and cultivate soil in that area, and herds society, or herdsmen, right, or having shepherds or things, requires that you are moving at all times to find more grass and pasture for your animals to graze, that you are always going out and kind of going out to, in some sense, conquer, but also like to take that grass, and kind of you need a lot of space in order to rotate the animals so that the grass doesn't die back entirely. If you think about it from like a farming perspective, they are farming animals, right? Essentially, in that way, in a herding society and an agricultural society, they were basically like farming food, like farming crops, instead of farming animals in that way. And of course, like that is a what's the right word, like a simplified version of what they're talking about, but that this story too, if we can understand like where this kind of like story comes from, is that there was this like societal tension between those two things, and that this story like exemplifies part of that like tension between kind of the sacrifice of animals or different things, the bloodletting that was often happening, and then the sort of like cultivating of crops, again the kind of like creation energy in that way. All right. Well, I think that's enough for today of me talking about Lilith. I love to think and I would love to learn more about Lilith even. I feel like again, like these books have some information. I appreciate the Goddess of Love Tarot and Gabrielle Herstick in general for talking a lot about Lilith, especially at this time of year. And as a sort of like, again, erotic, divine, feminine, a way to tap into your own energy and power of self. But I don't see a lot of nuanced, positive depictions of Lilith very often outside of these books that I have. And again, like I said, or Gabriella Herstick, who's just talks a lot about kind of the erotic, divine, feminine, and has written books too. So I'll have the link to the tarot deck of hers that I talk about, a link to just her website where you can find any of her works. She's written multiple books. The illustrator of the tarot deck that, of course, created this great depiction of Lilith, and then the two other books that I referenced today. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a different tarot deck so we can dive in and see what the cards have to say today on this topic. So I'm going to do that real quick. All right, we're going to go with the classic Sacerdote Tarot deck by Stasia Burrington. This was my first tarot deck. It still has a lot of the sort of color vibes of this Goddess of Love tarot card of the Devil. A lot of red and black. And just kind of, I don't know, goth vibes. So I'm going to shuffle real quick. And be thinking about, what else do we need to know right now? Is there anything else that Lilith would like to share with us? I was just checking. I have a candle burning back here, a black candle, and it's still going. That I started earlier while doing this episode. Okay. What else? Oh, I pulled the Star card, which in this deck depicts a kind of, we're in space. We see kind of the Milky Way across the middle of the card. We see an astronaut tethered kind of across the card in their astronaut suit out in space. And again, very appropriate for this time of year. The Star card is associated with Aquarius. In February, we are in Aquarius season, and around February 18th, 19th, 20th, depending on the year, we transition into Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And kind of the last one to come through until we get into the spring equinox and Ostera, where we have new energy, right? We start in Aries. It's creative energy. It is the spark. It is the fire sign. It is all of those things. So let's see. I'm familiar with the Star card, but let's look at what this deck in particular talks about. It calls it the astronomer, the navigator, the explorer. The star is full of hope, joy, lightheartedness, and free-flowing love. It is optimistic, trusting, excited, and inspired. The explorer is open-minded, serene, and generous. As the card directly after the tower, the star represents the calm after the storm. And this deck sometimes has quotes along with it, along with each card. So the quote for this one is, "What would you ask for if you knew the answer was yes?" So that is what I am leaving you with today. Going forward, I am doing weekly episodes published on Monday mornings. I'm having guest episodes about once a month. You can look out for those. Going forward, every episode will be on video, and you can check those out on Spotify and YouTube. Of course, the audio will go more places into your favorite podcast app, but if you want to check out the video, check out our Spotify, and YouTube channels. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can fill out my form to be a guest to submit an inquiry. Links for the decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on Patreon if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Tune in every Monday morning to check out the latest episode. And you can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com, with your thoughts, questions, and more. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.